Hi, Karen Curry Parker here. I want to take a few moments and talk about a really big topic in the human design community. And I want to debunk some of what is part of the mythology of deconditioning in traditional human design. So, when I studied with Ra, and you'll hear this repeated in a lot of different human design communities, Ra used to teach that the deconditioning process was a 7-year process. And one of the reasons why he told us that 7 years was essential was because that the body replaces all of its cells within 7 years. So consequently, the new cells that emerge after the 7-year process will be deconditioned because over the course of that 7 years, you will have lived true to yourself and you would have changed your identity, your personal narrative. You would have lived the self versus the not self, and it would have caused your reborn, newly generated cells to give you a new body that matched your new identity. I think that's sort of the reasoning behind it. So we have to talk about this because, first of all, if we look at this concept through the lens of science, we know that, yes, over the course of 7 years, a lot of cells replace themselves. But not all cells. The average age of a cell is about 7 years, but there are some cells that are in the cerebellum, and actually the cells that are in the lens of the eye that never replace themselves. We have those cells forever. Red blood cells actually replace themselves within about 70 to 120 days. Intestinal cells don't replace themselves except for every 10 years. Skeletal muscle cells can last up to 15 years, and skin cells replace themselves every 14 days. So that sort of begs us the question, well, what does entail deconditioning? And I think to do that, to have that conversation, we have to start first with, well, what is conditioning? And really, conditioning is first and foremost the story of who you think you are. It's the narrative we tell ourselves, and we know that that narrative sets the tone and the direction for what we create in our life. So our personal narrative does two things. It programs the reticular activating system to pay attention to our outer reality, to notice things in the outer reality that match the story we tell about ourselves. So if you are telling a story about yourself, if you have a conditioned story about yourself that says you're not worthy, then you're more likely to notice the opportunities that show up in your life that reflect that sense, that inner sense of unworthiness. The other thing that happens when we hold a personal narrative, and this is more in the human design zone, but this is what I believe and actually what I teach in my book, The Quantum Human, is that as the solar plexus mutation continues, and I think, the process of getting the body graph set up for the mutation started when we split from 7 to 9 centers, that evolution in the energetic form that is a mirror of our evolution in consciousness gave us the ability to become sovereign over our life path. If you think about if you were born many, many hundreds of years ago into the position of being a servant, you couldn't affirm your way into becoming king, right? It just wasn't how it was. And as our consciousness shifted and the world and the way in which we experienced our human stories changed, and we became more and more conscious of our ability to choose, we cultivated as part of that an opportunity, or the skill set, if you will, to create our own reality. Obviously, we're still in a very rudimentary phase of this, I believe, but we're heading somewhere important with this skill set. And I personally teach that the narrative you tell about who you are doesn't only program the mind to look for evidence of it, it actually programs the monopole that sits in the G center, and it influences what you actually attract into your life experience, because your story carries a frequency of energy, and we know that those frequencies of energies influence what we see, influence what we experience, influence what we attract. So deconditioning, or rather conditioning, is everything that's happened that has made you believe you are who you are. And those things can be good, and those things can be things that limit us from fulfilling the full potential of the story of who we are. Conditioning also comes, and we know this again from science, and this is a lot of what I'm doing my research on for my dissertation, that a lot of our conditioning, or at least a big part of our conditioning, comes from our ancestral lineage. We carry on our DNA protein regulators that basically switch certain aspects of our DNA expression on and off, and those regulators are oftentimes influenced by memories of things that happened in our genetic lineage, our ancestral lineage, up to 14 generations before we got here. Now, if you understand where that's located in human design, that's in the design crystal. So you're already born with a certain amount of conditioning. And of course, the design crystal always also carries the conditioning of the consciousness on the planet at the time when it emerged from the bundle that it was in with the monopole at the moment of your conception. If this is getting really way out there for some of you, ping me. I'll give you, I have some videos I can give you that can help you understand this a little bit better. Bottom line, we're conditioned by our life experience, and we're also conditioned by the ancestral lineage of who we are. And what happens is we have gene regulators from our ancestors. Those gene regulators are also influenced by our life experiences and also by what we eat and what toxins we get exposed to and the stress in our environment. And of course, our life experiences program the hippocampus in the brain to start looking for patterns that match the experiences that we've had from the past. Deconditioning is the process of changing those patterns, those perceptions of patterns in the hippocampus, so that we stop reacting to life and we become more observant, more present, if you will, to the experiences that life brings us, and we stop looking for old patterns that verify for us that perhaps our trauma is about to be triggered again. And we also know that when we start to do our inner work that helps us reframe our identity, reframe our perception, reframe the stories of our past, find the blessings instead of the pain, understand the purpose of the trauma, and reframe the trauma so that we gain more control over the trauma, we also shift our gene regulation. That process of deconditioning can happen in a nanosecond. And any of you who've ever worked with modalities like the emotional freedom techniques, or if you've ever sat at the feet of Byron Katie, and if you sat at the feet of Byron Katie, you probably had this experience yourself where in one flash of an insight, everything about how you see the world changes. So deconditioning can happen extremely fast in a nanosecond, or you can wait for 7 years, and then 14, and then 21, and 400. And if you don't do the inner work, you won't decondition. And so there's no magic time spell around when do we get deconditioned. You need, if you want to be deconditioned, you need to start doing the work of deconditioning, which means you've got to explore what in your past, what in your ancestral lineage, what in your own personal experience, what in your belief systems, what are you holding on to in your personal narrative that is keeping you from knowing your right place in the cosmic plan and the value, the preciousness of who you are as a once-in-a-lifetime cosmic event. Anything that keeps you from seeing your value, and any event or experience or anything that anybody's said to you, anything that's happened to you that's caused you to disconnect from your right place in the cosmic plan, your right place in the world, and your sense of who you truly are, is really the definition that I use for trauma. And we're all, to a certain degree, traumatized. So it's not like, we're all traumatized because part of, I think, our earth journey right now, collectively, why I think we're all here on a soul level, is to untangle ourselves from these old stories, these old karmas. So the process of deconditioning becomes essential not only for you to get more receptive to the coherent guidance that life is bringing you, the intelligence of life is bringing you, and that you're designed to interact with through your human design type and strategy. But that coherent guidance is also helping us all collectively disentangle ourselves from this massive old conditioning field that's told us we're finite beings that can only create on the material plane, that has shut down our innate quantum creative power. Anything that's kept us from fulfilling our maximum potential, we're here to disentangle ourselves from it on a soul level, because that's what the world needs if we're going to move forward into the solar plexus mutation and into an era that has the potential to bring us justice, equitability, sustainability, and peace, which I think is what the solar plexus mutation is really leading us. So here's what happens when you decondition, when you get those epiphanies, those reframes, when you do that work, when you stop being a victim of life and you go back and you reclaim your power over your narrative and your story. Gradually, what happens is you move yourself out of a fight or flight response, out of a stress response. That causes your adrenaline and your cortisol levels to decrease. That causes your dopamine levels to increase. And you move into living in what we call a state of coherence. That's when your brain, your mind, your heart, and your body are all functioning in unison together. That state of coherence radically increases your creativity and your availability to the fulfillment of your potential. That's the end result of deconditioning. And as I said, there are lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of different ways to be deconditioned. You can meditate. You can go to therapy. You can tap. You can use shamanistic rituals. You can eat really good food and take good care of your body and start to shift your sense of value as you start to love your body better. You can have an epiphany in the shower that can change your whole life. You can go for a walk and have an experience with a crow talking to you on a tree. There's no rule, hard, fast rules about how you get deconditioned. And certainly waiting 7 years to hope that maybe you'll be deconditioned because you did some waiting. Any of those things can work, but there's no hard and fast rules. And you ultimately are the one who is responsible for embarking on a journey of deconditioning, getting out of the way anything that's causing you from seeing that you are a once-in-a-lifetime cosmic event and that you have a unique, vital, and irreplaceable role in the cosmic plan. That's it. That's all I got for you today.